If you thought the John Wick franchise died with the master hitman, think again. Ballerina is about to hit you with some more action, and we're here to give you a recap that's just about as efficient as John's reload.
She sent you here to kill me?
Or you can leave.
I'm not leaving.
Your choice.
Wait, didn't we just say John Wick was dead? How is he getting into a fight with Ana de Armas' character Eve? Well, Ballerina is a midquel, which means that it takes place between John Wick 3 and John Wick 4. And though he's not the main character, it looks like John does play a pretty important role in Eve's story. That being said, it's a good idea for everyone, especially those who might be walking into Ballerina without having seen any of the original movies, to know who John is and the lore that surrounds him. John is a revered ex-assassin who's just trying to mourn the loss of his wife when a group of Russian mobsters decide to go and kill his dog and steal his beloved 1969 Boss 429 Mustang. He isn't just any ex-assassin, though. He's known as the Baba Yaga, which roughly translates to boogeyman in Russian. As mob boss Vigo Tarasov explains to his son Yosef, the one who initiated the unforgivable transgression against John.
Well, John wasn't exactly the boogeyman. He was the one you sent to kill the boogeyman.
Perhaps what John's known best for is how he extricated himself from the assassin game before the events of the first film. When he wanted to leave it all behind so that he could go and live a normal life with his wife, he was given a so-called impossible task to complete in exchange for his freedom. Against all odds, he was able to do this, which basically made him a living legend. And he was totally fine with just chilling for the remainder of his days, until Yosef had to go and let his fragile ego get the better of him. 4 ultra-violent movies ensue where John racks up a kill count that equates to the population of a mid-sized town and sustains more wounds than Tony Montana before he finally keels over and dies. Like we just said though, Ballerina takes place between chapters 3 and 4, so it's really only necessary to know the general gist of the first 3 movies before you go see Eve do her thing. As we give you this bare bones, or as some might say oversimplified, rundown, keep in mind that we're going to expound on the finer points of how the Wick universe actually works directly after. Here we go. Chapter 1 is, of course, the simplest of the Wick movies. As we mentioned before, Yosef and his goons kill John's new dog, Daisy, a final parting gift from his freshly deceased wife, and steal his car. Man, they really shouldn't have done that.
I once saw him kill 3 men in a bar with a pencil.
John digs up his old gear and re-enters the assassin game as if he never left in the first place. He takes a beating, but he succeeds in killing everyone involved. The end. In Chapter 2, John is forced to face the consequences of coming out of retirement when a crime boss named Santino shows up at his house and asks for his assistance. After a lot of bang-bang stuff, a double cross, and an actual pencil kill, John Wick shoots Santino in the head. As a result, John earns a spot on the naughty list, and a bounty is placed on his head.
I am so sorry. Your life is now forfeit.
Chapter 3 follows John as he deals with pretty much every assassin in the game coming after him. His solution is to ask for forgiveness from the guy who controls the naughty list. His wish is granted, but at the cost of his finger and his wedding ring. Plus, he has to promise to kill his friend. He ultimately refuses to do this and proceeds to kill everyone who is sent after him, only to be betrayed by his friend anyway.
Sorry, Jonathan. Don't see any other way.
Wounded yet again, he decides to gear up and take his fight to the higher levels of the underworld. Apparently, though, he takes a bit of a detour before the events of Chapter 4. Boom! How's that for a quick draw recap? John would be proud. Anyway, as promised, let's get into the finer points of how the Wick universe actually works, since this is the same world that Eve is forced to navigate in Ballerina. A good place to start would be the Continentals, a chain of hotels that serve as a sort of hub for not just John, but a sprawling network of assassins who operate across the globe. These establishments are luxurious, well-oiled machines that have just about anything a world-class assassin could want or need. By simply handing over a gold coin, you can secure a room, enter hidden lounges, or even request an in-house doctor to come and patch up your wounds. Pretty nifty. Over the course of the original movies, we're introduced to 4 different branches: New York, Rome, Casablanca, and Osaka. Each branch has a manager who keeps an eye on these killers for hire and holds them all to a rigid set of
Rules. Exactly. Rules. Without them, we live with the animals.
More on what those rules are in a moment. Winston runs the New York location, Sophia oversees the one in Casablanca, Julius deals with the Rome branch, and Koji keeps things zen in Osaka. It's implied that it's a global chain, so we very well might be introduced to a new one in Ballerina. All we know for sure at this point is that Eve visits Winston at the New York branch. This tracks, since it's the most prominently featured location in the original movies, not to mention it's also the sole focus of the prequel miniseries The Continental. A little more on that later as well. Okay, so about those rules. The two that matter the most are pretty simple, really.
2 rules that cannot be broken, Jonathan. No blood on Continental grounds, and every marker must be honored.
That first part might sound weird, considering these hotels largely exist for the sake of accommodating ruthless killers, but it's true. Though they're nefarious businesses, they're still businesses in the end. Can't just have shootouts breaking out every 5 minutes. This would draw much unwanted attention from authorities, not to mention infringe on the overall classiness of the establishments. Of course, this rule is sometimes broken, and the consequences vary depending on the nature of the incident. Sometimes it's not a big deal, like if the spat is more or less private and contained. Assassins will be assassins after all. In this case, whoever survives can request a dinner reservation, which is code for having a crew come to remove the body and clean things up. Other times, like when John executes Santino in front of, everyone in Chapter 2, things get a little more serious. Not only is the perpetrator's hotel membership revoked, but they are deemed excommunicado, which means that a bounty is placed on their heads. The hunter becomes the hunted. As for the second rule, markers are medallions that represent a blood oath established between 2 individuals. Remember when we mentioned Santino showing up to demand a favor from John in Chapter 2 earlier? That's a marker deal. Here's how it works. One person requests a favor from the other and leaves a bloody fingerprint inside the medallion. After that, they hand it over and know that someday the person who did them said favor will demand one in return. When that favor is returned, the other person pokes their finger and leaves a second bloody fingerprint inside, which signifies that the oath has officially been fulfilled. These blood oaths are usually witnessed by a third party and taken a bit more seriously than the no killing on Continental grounds rule.
You dishonor the marker, you die. You kill the holder of the mark, you die. You run, you die.
But who holds everyone accountable? Is there a singular organization of some sort that oversees the inner workings of this vast criminal underworld? Yeah, you could definitely say that. Remember when we mentioned John asking forgiveness from the guy who controls the naughty list in Chapter 3? He's referred to as the Elder, and he's the head honcho of the whole gang, the High Table. The High Table consists of 12 individuals who control pretty much every aspect of things behind the scenes. That might not seem like too big of a number, but don't be fooled. The official lore is that they own politicians, bureaucrats, and even entire police forces all around the world. Plus, they've allegedly been around since ancient times. Because of this staggering level of influence, they can pretty much do whatever they want without fear of repercussions. Each Continental manager pledges fealty to them and operates their establishments under the understanding that they can have their positions of power revoked at any time. And of course, the assassins who do their bidding are also very well aware of where they stand in the food chain.
I have served. I will be of service.
This doesn't stop certain people from standing up to them from time to time, though. One of these people is John. Duh. He even goes so far as to kill the Elder in Chapter 4. This ultimately results in John's death, but it also proves that they aren't invincible. Another person who has never been afraid to defy the High Table when the situation calls for it is Winston. We see this in the original films, when he aids John despite his excommunicado status, and also in the Continental miniseries. In fact, it's this defiance that ultimately results in him becoming the manager of the New York City branch in the first place. So what's his deal? Why isn't he as afraid of the High Table as everyone else? Okay, mini bio time, which is really just a quick recap of the Continental miniseries. Winston and his brother Frankie are abandoned by their mother in the 1950s and raised by Cormac O'Connor, the OG manager of the Continental. Winston grows up to be a businessman of sorts, while Frankie chooses to become an assassin.
Trained him myself, and now look at the son of a...
After stealing the High Table's coin press, the one that's used to create those gold coins we mentioned earlier, Frankie goes on the run. This puts Cormac in a tough spot with the High Table, and also causes Winston to be pulled into the drama. When Frankie is eventually killed by Cormac's assassins, Winston vows to take his revenge by taking over the Continental.
I'm going to kill Cormac. And I need all of you.
With a little help from a team he assembles, and also Sharon, who we'll discuss more in a moment, he pulls this off. He then kills one of the High Table's representatives, the Adjudicator, and keeps the coin press for himself. As this is the High Table's way of minting their currency, he's been able to use this as leverage ever since.
Well played, sir.
Throughout the original John Wick movies, we see Winston act as both friend and foe to John, but mostly friend. In Ballerina, it looks like he's responsible for setting Eve down her path of violence, which sort of mirrors the way he was introduced to a life of crime by Cormac. Definitely an interesting dynamic that has the potential to become complicated if Eve decides that she isn't thankful for being raised as an assassin. Now for Sharon. He originally worked for Cormac back in the day, but wasn't too stoked about how his boss went about his business. This is why he eventually switched allegiances and helped Winston usurp him. The two have been inseparable ever since. In the original movies, Sharon is the concierge of the Continental's New York City branch, and also Winston's right-hand man. He's a classy, subtle guy who exhibits a high level of professionalism no matter what bonkers situation arises, but he still finds time for some dry humor when it fits.
How good's your laundry? I'm sorry to say that no one's that good.
Sadly, he meets his end in John Wick Chapter 4, a twist that devastated fans when the movie first dropped, but that doesn't compare whatsoever to the real devastation fans felt when the beloved actor who portrayed him, Lance Reddick, unexpectedly died in 2023. As we mentioned in the beginning of the video, Ballerina is a midquel that takes place between Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, which explains why Sharon makes an appearance in the film. And the fact that it was filmed in 2022 explains why Reddick himself is in it and not some awful CGI phantom, like we've seen in so many other movies as of late. It's actually his final film credit. Needless to say, it'll be nice to see the iconic concierge show up one last time to accommodate Eve during her epic revenge quest. Another character from the original movies who shows up in Ballerina is the director, played by Anjelica Huston. We're first introduced to her in Chapter 3, when John seeks her out in order to gain safe passage to Casablanca after he's excommunicated. He presents her with a rosary, which basically signifies a blood oath, the same as the usual marker. Safe to say, she's not too happy about him showing up, being that he's on the run from the High Table.
You honor me by bringing death to my front door.
This is when we get a little taste of John's origin story. Turns out, his birth name is actually Jardani Jovanovic, and he was more or less raised by the director and the crime syndicate she oversees, the Ruska Roma. It was through them that he learned the vast array of skills he uses to wreak havoc worldwide. The director eventually agrees to help him, but this comes at a cost. He is branded with a cross, which ultimately means that he's forever exiled from the Ruska Roma. The director, too, pays a price for helping John. The adjudicator orders an assassin named Zero to stab her through both of her hands. Yikes. Honestly, though, it really isn't too bad of a punishment when you consider all the other terrible things that have happened to people in the Wick universe. At least she isn't kicked by a horse, right? Seriously though, this whole Ruska Roma sequence in Chapter 3 is basically where Ballerina jumps off from. As we see before John sits down to ask the director for help, she's watching a ballerina perform her routine on stage. After she agrees to hear John out in her office, she leads him through a backstage area where we see numerous other ballerinas stretching and other stuff.
As you know, art is pain.
Man, how is that somehow more brutal than anything John has ever done to someone? Anyway, it isn't made apparent in Chapter 3 that these ballerinas are anything other than professional dancers. Plus, when John is led through another room, we see only men training in judo, or whatever that martial art is. Turns out, though, we just weren't provided with the full picture of what goes on in the Ruska Roma HQ. In the Ballerina trailer, we see that Eve and some other women who may or may not also be ballerinas are training to become assassins.
You will always be weaker. You will always be smaller.
It doesn't really matter whether Eve is the only ballerina assassin or not. What matters is that Eve is receiving the very same training that John received back when he was a lowly orphan. This means that when she and John eventually face off, it's gonna get real. Like, more real than any other fight that's gone down in the previous Wick movies, and we're totally here for it. We also can't help but wonder why Eve's revenge quest is such a problem for the powers that be that they opt to send John in to rain on her parade.
There's a declaration of war if she's not called off.
Perhaps I can send someone to solve the problem.
Obviously, the deaths of her parents are connected to the High Table, or at the very least, someone directly underneath them. We'll just have to wait and see to find out who and why. Man, though, we've been waiting a while. Interestingly, the primordial version of Ballerina actually dates back to 2017, which was way before we ever met the director or her dancers. It's actually right around the time Chapter 2 came out. That being said, it comes as no surprise that its journey towards production has been somewhat difficult, but not as difficult as some outlets made it seem. Back in October 2024, insiders came forward to tell the Wrap that much of the movie, directed by Len Wiseman, had to be reshot by franchise creator Chad Stahelski. Not only that, they claimed that it took almost 3 months to do so. Turns out this apparently is not the case, at least according to Stahelski. As he told The Hollywood Reporter soon after these rumors popped up, "We went back in with my writing team that had done John Wick Chapter 4 and my stunt team, and we just gave it a little shine together with Len and what he had already done. It wasn't that much. Everybody's like, ah." Further clarifying that it didn't take literal months to reshoot, Stahelski said, "No, we just went in for a couple of weeks. We changed some of the action sequences and made up for some time that Len just didn't have. He didn't have enough time to do some of the bigger shots that it deserved. There was a weather thing in Austria, and so we got to go back in for that, so it's shaping up pretty nicely." We want to believe Stahelski, we really do. It's always good to take whatever insiders say with a grain of salt. But we can't totally ignore what Ian McShane, who plays Winston, said about the severity of the surgery here. During an appearance on the One Show, he appeared to emphasize that the work done was significant.
It's not reshoots, it's new shoots.
He then went on to elaborate.
You know, it's like they've got to protect the franchise. They've looked at it, and Chad's come in, the guy who directed all the John Wick movies, and they want to make it better.
So, yeah. Taking McShane's words into account, it's definitely possible that Stahelski is just saving face for Wiseman's sake and glossing over how much extra work was required to fix the movie. But honestly, we don't think it really matters at this point. They could have just let it be and released an imperfect movie. But Stahelski obviously loves the franchise he created and has no interest in phoning it in. What we're going to see in theaters is probably the best that he has to offer. All that definitely bodes well for future expansions of the Wick universe, which are most definitely in the works. The most exciting one is another spin-off that will reportedly feature Kane, John's blind assassin friend, and Akira Shimazu, daughter of Koji and concierge of the Osaka Continental. Plot details aren't readily available, but we have an educated guess about what might go down based on the post-credit scene in Chapter 4, where we see Akira approach Kane with a switchblade. In Chapter 4, Kane kills Akira's father in a duel, so it's pretty likely that's why she looks poised to attack him and seek revenge. Whatever the case, everyone involved is happy to see Akira's character make a return to the big screen. As Adam Fogelson, chair of Lionsgate, told Variety, John Wick Chapter 4 introduced us to so many compelling original characters, including Akira. We're beyond thrilled to have Rena coming back to the franchise. Kane and Akira have unfinished business, and this next chapter in their stories will be explosive. Donnie Yen, who plays Kane, is stoked about the opportunity to flesh his character out as well. He told The Hollywood Reporter, "Working on John Wick Chapter 4 was an extraordinary experience. Kane is an incredible character with a haunted past, and I am excited to return to the role." Everyone's asking if we're excited too, and we're thinking, yeah, Donnie, we're excited too.